Yeah, we're very honored to have here Nick Delaforge, who is co-founder and general partner of Planet A Ventures, which is a Germany-based venture fund that provides early-stage impact startups with not just funding, but also mentoring and forecasting, impact forecasting, right? Did I get that right? Yeah. He's a seasoned investor with a long trajectory investing in tech across Europe and a very strong believer in the combination of science and entrepreneurship in order to drive change. Change towards a more sustainable economy that can work for people and the planet. We also have Rafael Jordà, who's CEO of and founder of OpenCosmos. This is an end-to-end developer, designer, developer, and manufacturer, and operator, I should say, of nanosatellites. They are consolidating as a European leader in the new space sector, and they just recently launched DataCosmos, which is a platform where you can find images, data, and intelligence applications globally in order to tackle some of the most challenging problems related to sustainability. They're based in Spain and the UK, but have traction already across Europe, LATAM, Middle East, and Asia. So they're going to be illustrating and discussing a very interesting topic, which is how can data sort of tackle sustainable challenges? How crucial is data in this challenge that we have ahead of us?
Well, in my opinion, it's absolutely critical to have data at a global scale to understand what is going on, what impact we are having, and how we are going to react to it. It's well known that you can't improve what you can't measure, right? And the most challenging problems that we are facing globally need accurate measurements on how much oil is being extracted, for instance, from the soil, how many natural resources are being used and in which way. What's the impact of the extraction and transportation of those resources around the globe, or how much carbon is being emitted and how much it's being sinked, right? All of these are things that if we don't measure, we won't be able to improve.
Mm-hmm. So maybe to add to that, so when we started Planet A, we set out with the goal of supporting the most ambitious companies when it comes to tackling climate change and global pollution. And in the process of building the investment thesis, we thought, okay, there is very likely going to be a very clear correlation between the companies having the biggest positive impact and the ones who are being counted as the most successful ones in traditional terms, so in monetary terms. The big question, the elephant in the room is, however, how do you measure and forecast the impact potential of a startup, especially at such an early stage? And I think Rafael is personifying the automated analytical approach on how this can be done for forests and so on. We had to tackle this from another angle. How do you do that for early stage startups? And in the end, we decided to set ourselves up a bit differently than regular funds in the sense that we have a science team. And this science team is conducting something called life cycle assessments, which is a very holistic overview of a company, but in the end enables us to have a reading on how much better a certain innovation is compared to what we have as a status quo. And that we are able to extrapolate into the future given development in the market and also an estimated market share of theirs. And it boils down to the same concept. Data is absolutely crucial because these life cycle assessments, they are very scientifically precise studies. It's not something we invented. It's been the gold standard for impact measurement. And we find, and this is, I think, the key learning that we've had, which I'm happy to share, that most companies overestimate their impact because it is very hard to tackle all different dimensions. Once you maybe improve on greenhouse gas emissions, you might use more water or produce more waste, and it's important to take this holistically into account.
Yeah. And in doing so, are you innovating different approaches to measure? Are you following existing standards and building upon them? And are you, very importantly, are you sharing all those findings with other companies so that they can learn from that practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So we set out with the clear ambition to say Planet A is bigger than us, and if we focus on egos, then we are not going to make it as a human society. So we publish whatever we do as scientific studies. They can be found on our website, and also the approach we're very open with. So these life cycle assessments that we are using. And LCAs, in short, is something which has been known to the industry for a long time, so we didn't have to reinvent the wheel here, but it's building a lot on data that companies like Open Cosmos are gathering to basically have that very precise reading on what a company does.
Interesting. Maybe, Raphael, what is the most exciting data-driven solution that you have come across recently?
Oh, wow. Actually, we have many examples on what we call Data Cosmos platform. As a matter of fact, even if we are still keeping like in beta mode, we are onboarding 4 to 5 companies a month, each one of them with specific use cases and applications that basically just take the source of data that comes from our satellites, third-party satellites, and other sources of data that we harmonize, and then derive from it intelligent solutions that effectively bring the answers to governments and corporates about what decisions would be recommendable to take. Some key examples. One of our partners, for instance, is looking at the amount of oil that is extracted. And if you want to understand what's the impact that you have in terms of carbon emissions, you need to understand how much of the future carbon emissions, and therefore the oil that is going to be extracted, it's happening. Where it's stored, how much of it is stored, how it is transported, how many oil spills or venting of hydrocarbons there are in the sea while this transportation happens. And these partners have developed products that target each one of these needs, just taking images from the satellites and then understanding exactly how that entire delivery chain for that commodity happens. Another great example is a company that is working on, together with us, in the water management sector. Who would have believed that one of the key things that we are doing through the platform is monitoring desalination plants? Just literally telling to the customer how much turbulence there is in the intake of desalination plants that provide clean, drinkable water in desertic areas of the world. And we just realized that a lot of the turbulence is generated by the algae blooming, caused by the rising temperatures due to climate change, for instance. Right? These are some of the applications that we are seeing now emerging into the platform that we think put together the key technologies, data, and information in the hands of the public and in the hands of the decision makers. That's what excites us a lot.
Interesting. And so we are already collecting a lot of data. We have data like never before in humankind. How close are we to make good use of that data, though? Because that comes with challenges, right? What do you think?
So I think you have much more data points from the machine room. I think from our perspective, it's a gradient. So there is use cases in which we're incredibly able to make very good use of it, and there is others where the old concept still applies, bullshit in, bullshit out. So where we might have false trust in a system that in the end is not backed by good data. Maybe to give an example, a couple of years ago I was structuring, and this is still current, I was structuring a consortia for a couple of logistic companies, and the head of spare parts of an automotive OEM filled me in on their current mission to track all spare parts that entered a container ship in China through a QR code, because there is a high amount of fraud for spare parts, to track them from the boat until they are being distributed in Europe. And in the next sentence he said, but most of the fraud is happening in China. So most spare parts, most fraudulent spare parts are fed into the supply chains before they reach the boat. And to which I said, okay, but why then do you start tracking on the boat? To which he said, it's a constant battle, like leapfrogging forward to increase the hurdles of fraudulent behavior. And so I think that's a very good example where we're definitely not there yet, but we are constantly improving and talking to companies which are operating in the same field as you are with Open Cosmos. I would say that the bandwidth is very broad in how good the actual analytics are. And it can also be dangerous, right? If you have false data and then you say, okay, you are storing this amount of carbon, and in the end this is not happening, then this gives away false carbon credits, and is not really helping.
I agree 100%. I mean, the quality and reliability of the data, even if you have very abundant data, it's one of the issues, right? You need to systematically provide good quality and reliable, trustworthy data to take some of these key decisions. We are working very hard to make that happen, leveraging the satellite imagery and the satellite infrastructure that we can bring to orbit. At the end of the day, a picture doesn't lie, right? And it's accurate scientific data, what you can extract from there. The other key challenge that I think needs to be addressed for that data also to be more useful, it's not about building a generic way to analyze that data. It's about being able to have the niche expertise to apply certain kind of data to a very specific problem, algae blooming, or growth of certain types of trees, or monitoring of the coastal mapping, right? I think that the key is that we leverage common sources of data that are harmonized, scientifically generated, and of good quality with a reliable timestamp as well, and with the right frequency of data. But then we democratize it, and we make it available to both small, big companies, startups, to everyone that might have that niche expertise to bring that algorithm, that neuronal network product that is going to truly build information out of those data sets. I think that's one of the key challenges.
Yeah. Interesting. And you know, as we move along and more connectivity and IoT and the rest of it, data will continue to increase. And it's only now, I think, in the last years that a lot of companies, traditional companies, if I may call them that way, are sort of adopting company-wide data strategies, etc. How important is, you think, to building sort of common platforms of data across the organization that maybe traditionally have been operating sort of, even in the extreme cases, in silo mode, right? How important is that to?
It's essential. Sometimes when I try to explain the capabilities of the kind of data that we gather from satellites, I picture the two biggest challenges that I see out there right now. One is, with no doubt, sustainability and the climate action. The other one is the digitalization of many of these industries, right, that need that reliable data. And that needs to be done with external data that might be captured by sensors and systems like the ones that we put in orbit, but also their internal data, merging the two, working together with those corporates, those governments, those big organizations that have access also to that data in order to build together those solutions. We are seeing an amazing transformation and interest from many of these corporates into having this, let's say, digitalization approach to some of these legacy and traditional industries.
I fundamentally agree. My take would be a bit of a different one in maybe why we are not where we are. I believe technically this is feasible, like probably not easy, but feasible. But maybe to give an on-hands example, another logistics consortia I was structuring with my last employer in 2018 was with 3 of the biggest shippers on the planet. And we were a technology provider, basically had built a lightweight blockchain node. That's my old word, the Web3, but also the industrial version of it, which was usable on a Raspberry Pi level. So you could easily throw that into a container or even have it run on any type of computer. And the goal was to simplify the shipping process by having a digitized bill of lading and give, with a zero-knowledge proof, a very precise summary of where a certain shipping is throughout the entire supply chain, which is currently not really being digitized. And the technical infrastructure for that was one thing, and everything was on track. Why this didn't happen in the end was egos of the CEOs of these companies, which were not agreeing on a data silo. They all said, okay, we agree to share some data with our competition, but we want to have a slight edge, ever so slightly, to see a little bit more. And in the end, they all wanted the same, and nobody could agree to the terms of the next. And this is why this didn't happen in the end. And I think that's the big chicken eggs problem that we're facing when we're talking about really cross-enterprise platforms.
Okay. And what about collaboration? I mean, if we go back to sort of the energy transition challenge, I think the energy sector is quite characterized by being quite protectionist and so on. Collaboration is an important one because, I mean, clearly we cannot solve problems alone. We have to do it together. So do you see any signs that, any sort of green shots in that regard of companies working across sectors, nations, and so on in sharing information?
I think, like from our read on the energy market, it's an incredibly fractured ecosystem. So even if we look only at Europe, different regulations apply to different challenges. The current quota of smart meters in Germany, which would be the basis of doing anything with the data, to have that data, is close to 0% simply because basically the homeowners, oversimplified, have to pay for it, while in the US it's close to, I think, 75% currently, because in the US you have an incentivized system to spread out innovation into the market. And so this is highly, highly fragmented and really hard to build, not impossible, but hard to build solutions which are able to reach over the border at the moment that you are talking utility level. On a household level, it's a bit of a different topic, and we see fantastic solutions. It could be private homes, but could also be companies which are trying to optimize their energy usage by having some smart sensors which are able to predict certain behavior, to not heat over the weekend when people are not in the office, to not have light on over the office over the weekend in offices, and so on. But I think on a European level, there is, from a regulatory side, still quite a bit of work to do.
Okay. So yeah, sorry.
Yeah, look, I think we don't have to be naive, but at the same time, I think it's important also to acknowledge the importance of collaboration. Will it happen in all of the fields, among all of the companies, among all of the countries? Probably not. But I think we should realize that for the biggest global challenges, if we don't foster that collaboration, we are not going to solve them. Climate is not something, the issues with climate, it's not something that we can just sort from one single nation or from one sector or from one set of companies, something that we need to collaborate, whether we like it or not, if we are to address it in any way possible, right? If I have to put a hopeful note to this statement that I was doing, is that in sectors like the space sector, collaboration has been going on across nations and across companies very naturally. And I think it's because typically big space sectors like the International Space Station or others are things that can only happen when nations collaborate, put mutual resources into them, and different companies with different expertise and capabilities collaborate in them. So I see hope that some of the industries and some of the sectors already work in that manner, and I think vertebrating around those relationships something that is more ambitious at a global scale, impacting also other sectors as enabling capabilities, could work. So that's my hope.
Maybe to add to that, to exactly that point, because I fully agree. What you said initially, what we can measure, or you said what we can move, what we measure, what we can measure. And I think that data has the possibility of having that very systemic change. So we all know since already 30 plus years that climate change is going to happen, and this is potentially going to cause quite a bit of distress on our economic system for multifactorial systemic crises, like the biggest migration waves ever to be seen, breaking down ecosystems, and so on. And now I think for the first time we have sufficient data at hand to really build a precise picture and also put that down into costs. So for example, there is a company from London called ClimateX. We're not invested. And ClimateX is using data points such as yours to create a sandbox which is simulating the probabilities of different climate change-driven extreme weather events on a very low resolution. So for example, on 10 by 10 meter basis, they're able to say, okay, this is the likelihood of wildfires, of storms, of earthquakes, which are not really climate change-driven, but of floodings, and so on. And their customers is the finance industry. So basically, they provide ratings for the finance industry on how likely their their assets are going to be hit by one of these events. And that suddenly makes the finance industry wake up, because they understand that the costs of the behavior that we're currently still pursuing are exponentially higher than to make the turn and become a sustainable company. And maybe to share another data point, if I may,
sure.
Because that was really, really hopeful to me, again, coming from the automotive industry. So there is players who got it. So one of the biggest German OEMs, when their CEO steps on stage currently and says that we are calculating with an internal price of 100 euros per ton of carbon emitted. That's the estimated price for under the European Union emission trading scheme. It's a straight up lie. They are internally calculating 200 euros per ton, so the double of that amount, because they anticipate that regulation is going to hit them much harder than what the analysts are currently saying. And they are forcing effectively their entire tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 suppliers into ticking a box whenever they apply for an RFP, or request for proposal, to say we're going to produce completely CO2 neutral until 2030, which is incredible. Like this is true impact. Like anything that we do is like a drop in the ocean.
Yeah.
But that is true impact. But it's driven through innovation such as yours, because you somehow have to start somewhere and start to manage and measure.
Interesting examples. We talked a lot about data. We started to sort of move towards actionable information. What is the role of AI, artificial intelligence, in all of that? And what's stopping it, if at all? What are the challenges to develop that further at this stage?
AI, like many of the other technologies involved in trying to solve this problem, it's a tool. It's a tool that we have at our service to be able to find some of these solutions, right? So it would be impossible without the developments done in the deep learning and neuronal networks to process these vast amounts of data without them and extract meaningful information and insight about very specific niche applications. I think that's one of the huge potentials of AI, and it's a multiplying effect, right? Because you can use the results from one analysis into the inputs to a following analysis, and you generate a lot of additional information and useful and actionable information on the back of it. However, there is no holy grail, right? There is not a single technology that is going to solve everything. It's a combination of sources of data, communication, and transmission of that information, either through IoT or through other systems that enable the gathering and the distribution of that information directly to the decision makers or to the machines that are going to implement that operationally. There are a lot of technologies involved in both gathering the information and then articulating the solutions that the information empowers.
Yeah.
I could maybe try to provide a slightly different perspective in the sense that when I try to come back to what I said, what we as Planet A do to be very precise in impact measurement, then that AI allows us to be faster in creating this analysis. So we invested into a company called MakerSite, and they basically do what we do manually, automated, for all types of different industrial clients. And in the end, to maybe give you a comparison, they did that for a manufacturer of a car seat, or like the manufacturer of a car seat hired a team of 23 people who worked on having a complete emission footprint of that driver's seat, and they worked on it for around 23 days, I think. And they were working on it nonstop. And then they took that bill of material and let it run through MakerSite, and MakerSite gave out 95% of the exact same results after a minute and 15 seconds or so. And it was not at 100%, but it enables us to make meaningful adoptions to how we source, because then suddenly you're able to say, okay, how does my footprint change if I do not use leather grown on animals, but lab-grown leather or plant-based leather, and to in real time simulate how this is going to change. And that's also then bridging towards AI, because I think AI has the power of simply making us faster in understanding what are the real impactful choices.
So a big case on efficiency, speed to market, efficiency from all angles, right? From a cost, but also from a planet resource perspective, sustainability. Interesting. Going a little bit, we have a few minutes left, to sort of business models that evolve around data. What do you think are the key, the keys to a successful business model that evolves around data?
Well, I can talk a little bit about ours, right, in the platform that we call Data Cosmos. It's a revenue sharing approach, right? So we put together large amounts of data from different sources, harmonize them, and make them easy to be processed by expert analytical partners. So obviously, once the big customer, either a corporate, a government, or a smaller companies, request information out of this service that we provide, we take that contract, and there is a revenue sharing. Part of it goes to the analytical partner that provides the algorithm and that we execute also in the context of the platform. Part of it goes to additional sources of data if we have to procure any in order to provide a better and reliable service. And honestly, I think it's a business model that is very fair for everyone. It's very transparent, and that helps leverage the capabilities that each one of the players have. It goes without saying that to enable all of that, we do need to deploy expensive satellite infrastructure. So in our case, since we are doing that, we do it also on the back of customers. So some of those anchor customers that are interested in the data are also helping pay the critical infrastructure that we deploy in orbit in order for those data sets to be available. So all in all, it closes the loop, and hopefully we can make it a scale and have that flywheel that we have found spinning faster and faster.
Yeah. So basically, throughout the entire conversation, there's couple of words that are resonating over and over again. Collaboration is one of them across industries, between science and entrepreneurs, between companies, within companies as well as sharing, right? Because no one solution fits all. Do you have any sort of final remarks to the entrepreneurs of today and the entrepreneurs of tomorrow as to how they can sort of make a contribution and have a real impact on the planet?
Come play into our playground of Data Cosmos. That's what I would say to every single entrepreneur that there is out here. Let's try to build solutions to these global challenges together. We'll make our data and all of the technologies that we have built be put at your service so we can together find solutions to those problems.
I like the framing that you gave it, and to also draw the red line to why we are here. Because honestly, I struggle partially with being here. So to take the flight here is, I know, completely counterproductive. And one of the most influencing books that I've read in my path towards Planet A was Winners Take All, the elite charade of changing the world. So are we living under the spell of feeling, okay, I'm actually contributing and this is actually doing something good, and in the end I'm just part of a self-perpetuating system that in the end is not doing so much good. And I think that's a very important, to me it's a very, very important part to very regularly question, is this the best use of my time? And I feel like this is, but I think that's something I would give to everybody, because, and I know I'm very biased in that sense, but I'm very climate anxious, as you may be able to tell, and this is real, and I think everybody counts. This is not our mission as Planet A. This is a very joint mission, a very collaborative mission, and it needs us all in everything that we do.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I hope that this conversation at least triggered a little bit of questions on your side and curiosity, because that seems to be sort of the main driver on progress, right? So thank you very much for your time.